Thank you so much for inviting me along. My name's Julian and here I am in Brisbane, Australia. Can you hear me? I'm really excited to share with you something that I'm really passionate about, and that is stories. So let's jump into the main game. And the main game here is the second best job in the world. And it's all about stories and how stories can change your life. In 2006, I was bundled into the back of a helicopter and taken to a top secret location. Now, how secret was this top secret location? Well, the Prime Minister of Australia wanted to go. They said no to him. Sir David Attenborough wanted to go. They said no to him. I was off to see the Wollemi pine. Hang on a minute, a tree? Let me put this in perspective for you. There's two kingdoms. There's the plant kingdom and there's the animal kingdom. If this tree had been found in the animal kingdom, it would have been like finding a dinosaur alive 3 hours up the road from Australia's largest city, Sydney. So this was the botanical find of the 20th century. It was a big deal. And it was also at the same time that television was going from standard definition to high definition. And all the big players in natural history like National Geographic and Discovery and BBC, they all wanted shiny new high definition footage of these secret trees. So somebody had to go and I got the gig. Now they were really serious about me not revealing the location. So I had to have all my equipment checked to make sure that I didn't have any GPS devices. I had to sign a 3-page disclaimer document saying I wouldn't reveal the location. And everybody who took the helicopter flight in was blindfolded, except the pilot. Now, when you go in there, it's only a short ride, it's only about 15 minutes, and you come down below the rim of this deep canyon. And you know you're below the rim of the canyon because you hear the sound of the rotor blades bouncing back off the walls. And they say, take off the blindfold, and something strikes you straight away. There is nowhere to land the helicopter, except for one little ledge. Now this ledge is only big enough for the helicopter to come in and put the front of its skids there, and it hovers under full power. And you're there with the blades spinning. They're about 1 meter away from the next rock wall in front. You open the door and the smell of avgas hits you and little pebbles are abrading your face, and you slide all your gear out. The helicopter flies away and you're left in this beautiful silence with your next problem. And that is you are 600 feet above the valley floor. So from there it is 3 long abseils down, and it's dark and it's mossy and it's spongy. There's only 10% available light down there. And when you get down there, these Wollemi pine trees, they're odd looking trees. The strangest thing of all is like someone has glued Cocoa Pops. Now that's a cereal, like little chocolate rice puffs or something. And they glued it around the tree like this. But the most amazing thing is when you look down at your feet, you see these tiny little Wollemi pines. They're 25 millimeters or 1 inch high. They're 25 years old. 100 millimeters high, 100 years old. And there these little trees sit, waiting for one of the big trees to fall, the sunlight to stream in, and then they get their chance to grow. Well, that is exactly like my television career, because my whole career as a documentary cameraman, I had in front of the lens what I called my VIPs, my very inspiring people. Now, these people really affected my thinking, and through their stories, they affected my life. And I want to share some of those stories with you today. And I wrote those stories in a book called The Second Best Job in the World that was published by HarperCollins in 2010. You can still go get it. There's no hard copies left now. You have to get a digital copy. But if you write a book called The Second Best Job in the World, it naturally leads on to the obvious question. Yep, that's the question. Who's got the best job in the world? Well, I'm going to tell you. And you know, I've told this to thousands and thousands of people, and not one person has ever disagreed with me. The person who has the best job in the world is Sir David Attenborough. Now, you probably know him from all his 50 or 60 years of doing these wildlife documentaries in the most amazing locations in the world. Well, the reason David Attenborough's got the best job in the world and I've got the second best job in the world is that David Attenborough has been, I have been to many of these same locations that David Attenborough has been to, but David Attenborough did not have to carry the bags. This is the hidden side of being a documentary cameraman. Sure, we did a bit of that filming stuff out there, but honestly, the main thing I used to be was a glorified baggage handler. I used to take these 20 cases of equipment around the world for 20 years, on to baggage carousels, off baggage carousels, onto trolleys, into cars, into hotels, you name it. But the really good thing was that wherever the bags went, they were going to where I was going to meet interesting people. Now, when I wasn't doing this, I was doing what a lot of people considered to be dangerous things. And like when I was a climber, I obviously, I did it, but these dangerous things, I wasn't that good at them patently, because when I was a climber, I fell 40 feet onto my head. And I used to surf, and I came that close to drowning. And I used to race motocross bikes, and I had a head-on collision and went over the handlebars, and I've electrocuted myself twice. Now, the reason I've taken this little diversion and told you that is because I ask other people, do you like doing dangerous things? And most people go, oh, no, I don't like doing dangerous things. And that always strikes me as strange, because assumptions are dangerous things to make, and most of us don't have a problem making those, do we? Now, someone who made dangerous things for a living was Harry Houdini. He used to do dangerous escapes. Now, he was locked in a jail cell once that was touted as inescapable. Who'd they think they were dealing with? Some sort of amateur? Harry was ahead of the game. You see, he had smuggled in his secret lock-picking tools and his 5 hidden matches. Now, these matches, they burned with the dimmest of yellow light, but it was all he needed to begin the lock-picker's delicate dance of pressure, release, pressure, release. And the first match burned through, the second, the third, the fourth, and on the 5th, he knew he had a really big problem, because every sensation feeding back to his fingers was inexplicably wrong. And as that last match collapsed into darkness, Harry felt a feeling he was unaccustomed to: defeat. And he was confused and he was angry, and he threw himself against the door, and the door swung open. You see, by pure accident, the door had never been locked. But in his mind, it was locked. And that was all it took to keep the greatest escape artist of all time from opening a jail cell and walking free. So if the greatest escape artist of all time can be trapped by his assumptions, what chance have we got? So I want to spend the rest of my time with you here at the Real International Film Festival, and I want to talk to you about 2 assumptions that I had made in my storytelling, my visual storytelling documentary career. And then I'm going to make sure I get through these, because I want to leave time for the bonus assumption, because it's a goodie. So the first assumption that I made was I will never change. You see, I thought I was tailor-made for this documentary camera gig, and in many ways I was, because it is a beautiful balance of creativity and practicality, and I just love that. And I thought they were going to cart me off, camera still on shoulder in a wooden box. But remember those VIPs, those very inspiring people? Yeah, it's them and their stories. Yeah, they messed with my head. So I want to share with you now a story about Police Constable Graham Waddington, PC Graham Waddington. Now, I met PC Graham Waddington in Banbury in England. Now, Banbury is a place of lower socio-economic problems, and there's a school there called Drayton Comprehensive. It's a pretty tough school, and that's where PC Waddington was stationed. He was a police officer whose office was at the school. Now, to give you an idea of how tough this school is, and I hope this goes across the Pacific Divide, is, do you know celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay? You probably know him from Hell's Kitchen and those programs. Well, you know that he's a pretty angry, lippy, sweary sort of person. Yeah, that's what his persona is. He went to school at Drayton Comprehensive. So if you can imagine a whole school full of these 14 to 17-year-old little mini-me Gordon Ramsays all running around and swearing at, yeah, that's the sort of school it was. Now, this school had many problems, and one of the problems it had was the kids were sniffing aerosol cans. So PC Waddington was speaking to a classroom full of these 25 little Gordon Ramsay mini-me's, and I was filming it from the back of the room. And when PC Waddington started to talk to the class, he was amazing. A spell came over the class. You see, he didn't talk at them, he just talked with them, not above them, not below them, but just with them. And they and me were hanging on his every word. Well, the half hour went quickly and the bell rang, and the kids all have their bags in class there. So the tables and the chairs were scattering everywhere as they made it to the door. And from my position in the back of the room, I was the only person who saw this. 3 boys walked past the front desk without saying a word. They reached into their bags and took out a can of aerosol and left it on the desk. And I went, wow. Because in my career, I have filmed dozens and dozens of well-meaning government initiatives that have spent millions and millions of well-meaning dollars that have not achieved much at all. Yet, here was one man standing in front of a room full of boys who in half an hour stopped 3 boys sniffing aerosol that day. And something went off in my head. And I said, I am going to be doing this one day. This idea of direct action. I'm going to be standing in front of a room full of people affecting change. I had no idea what that was going to be, how it was going to happen, when or where. I just knew it. So with these ideas in my head, I went back to doing what I was really good at. Yep, being a glorified baggage handler. And I just carried more and more of these cases around the world. And of course, where the cases were, they led me to interesting people. And as I was filming these people, I realized I had my own private anthropological lab where I could study people. And I started to look for patterns, because when you do documentary filming, you with people sometimes for days, weeks, months, and sometimes periodically repeating over years. So you get to see a different side of things. And I started to study them, and I looked for patterns because I wanted to know what they knew that allowed them to be in front of the camera affecting change, where I had this now drive and passion to be, but I didn't know how to get there. So I worked it out. It took me years and years of studying, but I worked out the common thing of successful people in front of the camera. Now, when I say success, that's by all metrics of success. I'm not just talking financial or educational, all metrics of success. People who were doing the thing that they wanted to do. And I worked it out. This is what I discovered, that extraordinary people are ordinary people who do extra. You see, with hanging out with these people, I got to see continually these people, they had a base talent, but they turned up early and they went home late. consistently. And this was the most liberating thing I had ever discovered. You know why? Because think about it. To be extraordinary means you have to be ordinary to begin with. And Your Honour, Exhibit A, the world's most ordinary man. I don't think I've been gifted with any particular talent, but I have always been willing to start early and go home late. So with this newfound sense of optimism, I went back on my journey to discover how I was going to affect change in the world. So, of course, I went back to doing what I did best, the glorified baggage handler. And sometimes that was very cold and very wet and very muddy. The second assumption that I'd made was I assumed that change was a process, because years and years went by and I was still behind the camera. I mean, I had a great gig, don't get me wrong, but I couldn't work out, I couldn't get in front of the camera, metaphorically in front of the camera to affect change. And I made a mistake. I thought that change was a process. I thought if you just kept on turning up and applying yourself, things would happen. No, somebody told me differently, another one of my VIPs, and his name was Jimmy Filiaggi. Now, Jimmy was your punk kid around town in Lorain County in Ohio. Now, Jimmy had an anger management problem, and that's where his nickname, Diffuse. He had a short fuse. You did not want to get into a fight with Jimmy and poke him in the chest like that. Worst thing you could ever do. No, sir. This anger he had, it took him down a very bad path, and it all culminated with him getting in a very heated argument with his wife, Lisa. He put a gun to her head and pulled the trigger. He was charged with murder and he was sentenced to death. And I met him on death row in Mansfield Prison in Ohio. Now, death row is a prison within a prison within a prison. And it's really quite hard to get in there. So when you get in, you make the most of the time. Now, the reason we were in there, we were filming a documentary about the science of anger. And we wanted to talk to Jimmy about choices he had made and a choice he was going to have to make that very few people on the planet would ever have to make. You see, at this time, the mandated form of execution in Ohio was the electric chair, and they were just bringing in lethal injection, but it wasn't mandated by law. So the prisoner was given the choice of how they would die. And this is what we call Jimmy's choice. And it was a very unsettling subject to be part of. So this time we had with Jimmy, we had an hour with him in there, and it went very quickly. And when the hour came up, they came straight in, and Jimmy was shuffled out. And as he was being let out, I thought, how often do you get to be on death row with someone convicted? And I thought, boy, he's had a life. It's completely different to mine. What could he share with me? So I thought, heck, why don't I ask? So as he was being let out, I just said, hey, Jimmy, is there anything you can share with me that might help me? I know it's a bit of a dumb question, maybe. Anyway, to my surprise, he said, yeah, okay. And he said, come here. Now, Jimmy had been on death row for 12 years by the time we had met him. So he was older. He was a bigger man, and he's quite tall. He's maybe 6'3", 6'4". And he said, come here. Oh, bit intimidating. And so he's shackled from his ankles to his waist and his waist to his wrist. And he said, come on. And so I came up close to Jimmy and he said, lower your head down. Huh? He said, yeah, lower your head down. All right. So I started to lower my head down and he raised his fingers. And I could hear the little short chain go taut. And as my head went lower, his fingers came up to my temples and he tapped. And he said, 8 inches. You are only ever 8 inches away from the best decision or the worst decision of your life. And with that, he turned, last I ever saw of Jimmy. Now, I didn't mean much at the time, but over the years it percolated down. And I've come to understand, it was part of my path to understanding that this assumption that change is a process. No, it's not. Change is a decision. And change requires hard decisions. And when you make the hard decisions, you watch. The change naturally flows on after that. So I had to make hard decisions, and I made them one of the hardest decisions of my life, because at the top of my documentary camera career, I walked away because I had this idea in my head that I was going to teach the concept of philanthropy to school children. So I took this program that I devised into schools to deafening silence. It was a commercial failure. And I pushed it for a couple of years. I could get no traction. And then by this time, my TV career had sailed off into the distance, and I was left with no job and no money. So I had to reinvent myself. Now, one of the things I used to do as a cameraman was always carry some magic in my camera vest, because get this, people don't trust the media. Oh, I know. So a little bit of magic used at certain times was a great way to build rapport, to build bridges, to break down barriers. So I took these basic skills that I had in magic and I built upon them and learned really fast and transformed myself into a professional magician. Now, I primarily did kids and family shows, and this was okay until I had a horrible realization after doing this for a couple of years. I realized that I had become a glorified baggage handler again, because I was just taking magic cases into shows and bringing them all out again. I thought, this is not what I signed up for. So this led me on to having a YouTube channel, and I became a YouTube magician. Now, this was in the early days of YouTube, and back then it was a successful channel. It had 30 million views, 140,000 subscribers. I mean, back in the early days, that was doing pretty well. So this led me on to building what was called Kids Entertainer Academy. It was the world's first online training academy for professional children's entertainers. So we took people all around the world. I did this in partnership with a person in England, and we took people all around the world who had this desire to be a professional children's entertainer but didn't know how. So we taught them the skills, but we taught them the mindset and the underlying psychology to take them from being stuck to being unstuck, to be sometime, part-time and full-time professional children's entertainers. I sold this business 4 or 5 years ago, and that same psychology of change and mindset, I've gone back to what I really know best, and that's video. And now I'm known as the Video Magician, and I work with businesses to help them implement video, because they're very slow to implement it. It's not the technology. You can use a smartphone. I've used the best cameras in the world. The only camera I use now, the only camera I own, are my smartphones. So it's not technology. You can press a red button. It's people. People are resistant to change. So that's what I'm good at. I'm helping people make change in their life. And I'm loving doing this out there. And this is part of what I do. I'm now a speaker as well. So I owe a lot of my change that I've been able to ordinary people and their stories. And I'd like to again thank PC Graham Waddington for helping me understand that extraordinary people are ordinary people who do extra. And Jimmy the Fuse Filiaggi, he really helped me on that path to understanding if you want change to happen, you've got to make hard decisions. Now, all those stories, their stories, they changed my life. Here's the thing, I had to carry those 20 cases around the world for 20 years to hear their stories. You now can have access to all these stories in volumes far greater than I ever would, and you don't have to carry those 20 cases, because stories can change your life. All you have to carry instead of those 20 cases, this is a no baggage required thing, is one tiny little case, your smartphone, because on it you have the gift of podcasts and you have the world's best thinkers and storytellers on there. So how do you access them? If you're not a podcast listener, then come out with me on Footpath University. I'm out there at 5 a.m. every morning. You don't have to, you can do it whenever you want. But what you do is you trade a half an hour or an hour of television at night for some time in the day where you're going to go for a walk, put on a set of headphones and listen to a podcast. It's what I call getting a big mind and a small waistline. So if you want some starter podcasts to get you going, to get you thinking about change, I've got a little site there called footpathuniversity.com. It's all free, go along and it might help you. So now I want to get on to this last bit here. I want to do the bonus assumption. Now, the bonus assumption happened on the Yucatan Peninsula. The Yucatan Peninsula is that thumb of land that sticks out of Mexico into the Gulf of Mexico, sitting down there below Texas. Now, you would not want to have been on the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago, because that's where the meteorite that hit Earth and wiped out the dinosaurs, that's where it landed. I was there with NASA, and NASA were drilling core samples to try to unlock the mysteries of what happened from the layers of the rock. Now, when you do these sort of documentaries, you always have to allow time to get aerial shots. Well, we had left it to the last moment. And on this hot Mexican afternoon, we'd booked a little plane, we got to the airstrip, and the pilot was nowhere to be seen, and we're watching the sun go down, and it's just myself and a producer named Richard Smith, and we were standing there getting more anxious, and a young Mexican man came up. He was 19, 20 years old, and he just stood with us near the planes, and it was a little bit awkward. And all we got out of him, because we didn't speak Spanish, he didn't speak English, that his name was Ronnie. Ronnie, Ronnie. So I did what I always did when things were a little bit awkward. I reached into my camera vest, took out a little bit of magic, did a little bit of magic for Ronnie, got him smiling and laughing. The pilot came, hurry, hurry, we must go, we must go. So we all bundled quickly into the little plane, took off into the hot Mexican skies, bouncing around there in the thermals. And it quickly became apparent to us that we were flying above Mexico in a little bubble of assumption, because we had assumed that Ronnie was with the pilot. And the pilot, of course, assumed that Ronnie was with us. Turns out we were flying around Mexico, over Mexico, with a complete stranger. No idea what he was doing there. But do you know how when you travel with people, you get to know them really quickly? We got to know Ronnie really fast, because what we found out about Ronnie is he got airsick. And I don't mean just like a little bit of airsick. I mean like someone got a stick of dynamite and stuck it into a can of pineapple pieces. It was horrible. So I, to this day, have never, ever known who Ronnie was, but I will never, ever, ever forget Ronnie. So to finish off our time here, I want to do for you that same trick that I did for Ronnie on that hot Mexican afternoon. And I've named this trick in honor of Ronnie. It's called Ronnie's Mysterious Knot of Yucatan. Now, I love doing this because any 10-year-old with 20 years experience can do this. All you need to do is find a piece of rope with the following features. Needs to have two ends and a middle. I know, very hard to find. You also need a second piece of rope. This one here is a lovely shade of red and plain old white. I'm going to make the first knot I ever learnt, the simplest of knots. You make a loop, reach through, the simplest of knots. However, my friends, this is no ordinary knot. No. This, my friends, is Ronnie's Mysterious Knot of Yucatan. You see, if I twirl the ropes like this, and then I say the special words, Now I must say these words secretly and silently to myself. You don't hearing that, are you? And you see, when you untwirl the ropes, the knot jumps off the white rope and onto the red rope. I know, 2 for the price of 1. Now, so mysterious is Ronnie's mysterious knot of Yucatan. You get a little massage, a little squeeze. It releases the essential oils and turns it into a sliding knot. A bit of practice, you can slide it right off the end. And just when you think you've seen it all, oh, it jumps straight back on. Now, if you were to have a handful of invisible powder, which I conveniently carry, and give it a little sprinkle, just a little, you see it becomes a jumping knot. But don't be fooled, because this is first and foremost a sliding knot. You see, it'll slide from here all the way over to here, which makes this next part truly amazing. A little blow, a little rub, and the knot becomes part of the rope. No joins, no seams. And this brings us to the dramatic and applause-inducing conclusion of our time together. Hey, thank you so much. I hope that you go out, that you listen to people's stories. Stories can change your life. I'm just going to go back. If you want to follow up with me, and just to quickly let you know, come join me on LinkedIn. I'm there a lot. And for the Real International Film Festival, if you go to julianmather.com/RRIFF, I got a special offer for you there if you want to do some video training. Really good deals for you guys, and it's to say thank you for inviting me along. And with that, hooroo, back to you.